All right, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD 1000 Web Development Technologies course, I'm creating a series of video presentations that are based off of the Mozilla Developer Network Learn Web Development series. We're on web forms, and we're up to how to structure a web form. And as it says, with the basics out of the way, we'll now look at more detail at the elements used to provide structure and meaning to the different parts of the form. The flexibility of forms is one of the things that makes them a complex structure. You can build any kind of form. So again, the one we've been working with has been very simplistic. Using correct structure will help make your form both usable and accessible. And again, when you think about it, if I'm selling products, I have no idea who is buying my products. I don't care who's buying my products, probably. All right, so let's just say I'm selling, I don't know, books. All right. And maybe I provide books, both regular books and books in Braille. All right, so if I provide books in Braille, there's probably at least a chance that some of the people who go out to buy my books will be using a browser for the blind. So I want to make sure that if there's a form they have to use, if they want to order books, that particular form is very accessible to them. Okay, so the form element, as it says, formally defines the form and attributes that determine the form's behavior. All right. Many assistive technologies and browser plugins can discover form elements and implement special hooks for them. It's strictly forbidden to nest a form inside of another form because this can cause forms to behave in an unpredictable manner, so don't do it. It's always possible to use a form control outside of a form element. If you do so, by default, that control has nothing to do with any form unless you associate it by using a form attribute. All right, so you can bind a control to a form even if it's not nested to it. All right, so the first thing they talk about is something I've already mentioned to you, and that is the field set and the legend. So they give an example in here of using the field set and the legend, and let's just look at their example. So there it is. So the field set is the big square that you see around here, and the legend is the text that goes in there. All right. It says the use case here is important. Every time you have a set of radio buttons, you should nest them inside of a field set. So there's a field set that we're using, and that gave us these buttons. And these buttons, since they're in a field set, only one can be selected at a time. And once you select one, whatever had been previously selected is deselected. All right, and these are known as mutually exclusive because only one can be selected at a time, and typically they're called radio buttons after the old-fashioned 60s and whatever, when you had radio buttons in an automobile where you could press one to choose your radio station. And if I press this, that would go to that station, press this to that station, etc. All right. Because of its influence over assistive technology, the field set element is one of the key elements for building accessible forms. However, it's your responsibility not to abuse it. In other words, you shouldn't have them all over the place. Each time you build a form, try to listen to how a screen reader interprets it. It may sound odd, but if you are building something for everybody to use, it's worth your time. Now, they didn't say to do this, but again, I can come in here now, and where was that? Where we have this border all the way around here, all right, I can now remove this. So I'm going to comment out these two lines. And you see, as soon as I comment out those two lines, you can see what it did to this. Okay? Still looks fine, but it doesn't have anything around it. I'm going to fix that now by putting in field set. Sorry. And let's add that border radius back in. Now, in order to be able to do this, we're going to have to come in here and again put in our field set. And we will add the legend in right away as well. I think it just said contact. In fact, if I put in here contact, I'll just put in contact. That's fine. And then down here, we will end our field set. Okay. And the other thing I'll do, you don't have to do this, but since I did come in and made the field set, I gave it a border radius so it was a little centered. I'm going to come in here and say legend, and we'll say font weight bold to have it stick out a little bit. Now it should look pretty much like it did before, except previously we did not have the legend in there. So there we go. And there's even ways, I know there are, that we could come in here and take that and center it, etc. It might be something as simple as a text align center. I don't know. And there you go. Now, if you don't like that, no problem. All right, but all I'm trying to show you is how to implement what they were talking about in here, because at least so far they haven't really explained it. All right, then let's talk about the label here. It says we saw in the previous article that the label element is a formal way to define a label. A label is like a heading. All right. So this is the example we saw previously. Again, that for equals name means that we have to have an ID of name. And once we do that, we have associated that label with that input. All right. Now, this would be stupid. What I'm about to show you doesn't make any sense, but I believe that if I come in here, let's just say that I said this. I'm going to put in email right here. I don't know why I would ever do that, but let's just say that accidentally I did that. Now I'm going to reset. The form doesn't look any different, but when I click on here, you'll notice that goes there, but this doesn't go anywhere. The system is confused, for lack of better words, over where it should go, because I've tried to associate it with, oh, and we put mail there. So let's just try to say mail. Probably why it didn't go anywhere. So look at that. I clicked here and it went there. Don't do that. All right. I mean, that should just make sense to everyone that this should have been name. All right. But again, this is one of those kind of problems that you can make. Typically, it'll be, a mistake, something you didn't mean to do. I mean, but, it's people do things they shouldn't do. All right. There's another way to associate a form control with a label. Nest it within it. So you could have done this as well. It says, even in these cases, it's considered best practice to set the for attribute. I don't know. I've never done it like this, so I don't know why you would do that, but you can. All right. Again, as I've already mentioned to you, another advantage of properly setting up labels is you can click or tap them to go to the particular text box or text area or whatever. Strictly speaking, you can put multiple labels on a single widget, but that's not a good idea. Again, if somebody was using an assistive technology, such as a browser for the blind, that could prove to be confusing by doing this. All right. It says there, the paragraph at the top states a rule for required elements, as you can see right here. The rule must be included before it is used so that sighted users and users of assistive technology, such as screen readers, can learn what it means before they encounter a required element. So here we've got here an abbreviation, title equals required. The key thing is here. Again, whenever you think you see anything with ARIA, I always pronounce it ARIA, I think that's correct. That means that it's going to be something that's going to assist people who have some kind of an impairment. All right, so there and here. As it says, a screen reader will speak an asterisk as a star when it's required. All right. The above variants increase in effectiveness as you go through them. In the first example, the label is not read out with all the input. You just get edit text blank. In the second example, things are clearer. It says name star, name edit text required. So again, if somebody is using a browser for the blind, rather, all right, it would be very assistive towards them. You might get different results depending on the screen reader that you use. All right. Common HTML structures used with forms. All right, it says, you can see in the examples, it's common practice to wrap a label and its widgets with an LI element within UL or OL. All right, P and div elements are also commonly used. And I will tell you, to be perfectly frank with you, this is the first time I've ever seen one of these done with a UL. I've never seen one done with an OL, but normally I put all the elements from my form either in P tags or even more commonly into a div tag or div tags. All right. In addition to a field set element, it's common practice to use titles to structure complex forms. Well, you know what? You already saw that right here because I put that in. Above all, it is up to you to find a comfortable coding style. That's a big thing, and it's a very key point here. And that is the fact, be consistent. That's actually unbelievably important that you are consistent with this. And I've always said this to my students. Two things. First of all, what you'll oftentimes find is if you go into a career as a programmer and you go to work for a programming shop, so to speak, the bigger the shop, the better the chance they'll already have their own coding style. Now, if you're the first person hired in as a web developer, let's say at a company, then you create the coding style. All right, but I've told students a couple things, and that is first, while you're a student here, develop your own coding style. This might be the last time you get to work with your own style, but be consistent with it. And I've told them even a bad coding style is better than none at all. All right. So it says we want to make a local copy of the blank template file and the CSS for our payment form. So we're going to do this one now. So let's take the one that we've got, which has been this index right here. We will save it. And I'm going to remove my first form also, and we'll save that. I'll just say yes here. I know that's not exactly where I wanted to put it, but that's okay. All right. So let's come in here and, as they say, grab our blank template file. You already know that that's basically almost nothing. And we're going to call this, they don't tell us to, I don't think, but I'm going to put this into my forms folder, and I'm going to call this payment form.html, not FOFM. All right, so there's that. And we want the CSS for this. Now, they look like they're putting it into a separate file, which is, of course, totally fine. Not only is it totally fine, it's the expected way of doing things. So let's do that. And we're going to call this one payment.css. Let's see what they call theirs. Payment form.css. That's not a problem. All right. As of right now, two things. First of all, there's nothing in this payment form. It's not going to look like much. Second of all, we have not yet associated the payment form with our CSS file. I'm trying to show you good practices. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder that I'm going to call CSS. Whoop, not SS, CSS. And I'm going to grab that payment form, which again, I guess I spelled wrong. And let's close it here. And first of all, let's spell it correctly. So payment form. So now it's spelled correctly. And let's put it into our CSS folder. Again, you don't have to do that, but that's just better practice to do that. So now it's in there and it's in the correct folder. All right. Then they want us to bring in our form tag. Okay, let's just follow all of their steps here. And I'm butting on to 16 minutes, so I'm getting close here. So there's our form tag. We'll put this H1 in here that they talk about. Now I want to make this a little bit easier to read. I typically do this with my paragraph tags. You by no means do you have to do this. But again, I like doing that because I can see right where my paragraph begins and ends. Now they want this section put in here. And it's going to look all out of whack, I'm sure. All right, that looks a little better. Now, there's been no CSS formally added to this yet, but let's take a look at what it looks like anyway. There it is right now. All right, not very nice, but not terrible either. Notice, though, not responsive. Oh, I guess it is responsive. There you go. A little bit at least. Semi-responsive, how's that? All right, let me get rid of this and this. Go back to here. All that's doing is setting this up, so I'm not going to read through this. Hopefully by now you'll notice that there's a field set with a legend, and everything is put into an unordered list. So we've got here, this will be our radio buttons here, and this is the regular form down here, and it's all in the section tag. All right. So again, we're wrapping the content inside a distinct section element. There's the radio buttons. The second one is for the payment information. So enter the following below the previous section. Okay. This will probably run over 20 minutes. Apologies in advance. So with that added then, we had this. We've now added this down to the bottom. All right, you can see the form is getting quite lengthy. All right, a lot of height in it, for lack of better words. The last section we add is a lot simpler with only the button in it. All right. Now, one thing they did not mention in here, and that is, when I bring this in, it's not going to look like this. I'm warning you right now. It's not going to look like this. Why? You should be able to figure out why. All right, I've got everything in there now. There's my button, but I did not yet associate in here in my head section the CSS. So I've got to say link rel equals style sheet href equals, now I have to say CSS because that's where it lives, slash, I don't remember what we call that, sorry, payment form.css. All right, and through that magic, now when I refresh, looks a little bit nicer. And this is my page. All right, we wouldn't need that, of course, but all right, we made something that looked pretty decent. All right, you've reached the end of this article. There is a test in here that you might want to go take a look through. This Sensible Forms, a Form Usability Checklist, a great article. I know I've looked at that in the past. So we've now gone through 2 sections in here. And next we're going to come up and talk about basic native form controls. I'll be back with that one shortly.